Since its premiere last Friday, the documentary The Square has not only made history as the first film to debut on Netflix and in theatres simultaneously, but also as the first Egyptian film to ever earn an Oscar nomination. Director Jehane Noujaim joins me now, along with The Square producer Karim Amer, to discuss their Academy Award nomination for Best Documentary and the public reception that their film has received. So welcome both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so first question, have you come down from the Oscar nomination high?
It was a great honor to be nominated and we're so humbled to have been nominated with such incredible other filmmakers and films. And also just the fact that it's spread the perception of this film both in the US and abroad and in Egypt has been very important to us.
Yeah, and the idea of, sort of spreading the perception of the film, I want to mention and take this moment to mention that as part of this conversation, we're actually collaborating with participant media's Take Part, Boom Gen Studios, Witness and Good to feature as many voices as possible in this discussion. And Take Part is actually hosting a live blog. You can check that out. It's on their site where viewers can leave questions in both English and Arabic. And you can find a link to in our resource well below. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag #TheSquareLive. So with that being said, let's just talk about at the moment, today, it's minutes after midnight in Cairo. We are on the 3rd anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution. And then, you've had this buzz about the film. How are you both feeling? Does it feel sort of overwhelming? Everything is sort of happening at once?
There's a lot happening. I mean, one of the big things that have happened today is that there's been a big bombing in Egypt, and that's really obviously very upsetting to us. And so as we are celebrating the release of the film and as we hope that people are, by watching the film here and in Egypt, reminded of why we went and made this film in the first place, because it was this incredible moment of people of all different sides coming together and dreaming and looking for a better Egypt where people were fighting for freedoms and social justice that have not existed and that people are still struggling for. So we do celebrate the international recognition and the importance of these topics to be talked about, but it is coming out at a time when it's a very difficult time in Egypt, and especially today with these bombings.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of on a note about the bombings, I mean, we've seen here, and I've got the BBC News article, 4 bomb blasts were on Friday, and, one including outside the police headquarters, and it left a crater, and you can see that on the image here, and some of the devastation that took place. Despite this shadow on the anniversary, we have people asking you the question. First, congrats and well done. But the second question: are you planning anything for tomorrow? Will you be out in Tahrir in spite of today's bombings? I hope so, says Angie Amara. Are you going to be back in the square on Saturday?
Well, this film has been made by an incredible team of people that met in Tahrir Square. And we are just the ambassadors of the project here. There's over 40 people involved, and our team in Cairo will be in the square. However, and we'll be coming down, but we don't really know, I don't really feel that the mood in Cairo is going to be one that's celebrating the 3rd year anniversary. I think that, if anything, the growing sentiment right now is that there's still a long way to go before the demands of the revolution and the hopes of what we had aspired for in those beginning 18 days in 2011 will be accomplished. I think that it's a really dark moment right now, but I think a lot of people are finally realizing that we need to come back and stand together to reignite the spirit of what this revolution was about.
Karim, you sort of mentioned there that it's a dark moment, and not to make light of that at all. And we did actually expect to have Khalid Abdullah with us, and he was a main protagonist, very much an integral part of the film The Square. And he can't be with us, unfortunately, because he's dealing with a backlog of red tape because of an arrest of a friend of his, and that just happened, I think, in the last few hours, certainly within the last 24 hours in Egypt. So, given the situation hasn't come to any sort of resolution, how are you feeling on the eve of this 3rd anniversary? Are you feeling tentative? Are you feeling sort of reticent about all of this?
I think we all feel that You know, as Ahmed said in the film, this revolution was a voice. It was the regaining of authorship of the future that many Egyptians felt for the first time. And I think that infractions against human rights, the attempt to try and break to steal the authorship of this revolution, or the attempts to try and take out any active voices that are trying to ask difficult questions or trying to criticize different government positions, will only lead to further bubbling and further agitation within the country. And right now, when we have so many people who have been rounded up since this constitution, since before the constitution, and people have been arrested, and like Ali Abdel Fattah, who still has not faced trial, and I was just talking to his family, and they don't even know when his trial is going to be up for, or Ahmed Meher and Ahmed Douma, who are people who have received 3-year sentences for bogus charges. I think that, you know, it's a very telling moment of the country's appetite towards freedom of speech, and that I think that if we've learned anything, the resilience of the youth movement in Egypt is going to continue pushing forth and will not be silenced. So the authorities, I feel, have a responsibility to allow for freedom of speech to continue and to be protected, and we as an international community have a role to protect that freedom of speech, because it is a fundamental human right. And when we allow it to fade in Egypt, in the square there, we're allowing it to fade elsewhere.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about freedom of speech, because one of the things that I feel like has been caught up, you know, sort of with the release of the film, and, you know, it's a fantastic achievement, what has just been happening with the film. It's really great. But one of the things that sort of been caught up has this idea of censorship. You know, the headlines that I've been seeing is that it's banned in Egypt, and that actually is something that Egypt's chief censor, Ahmed Awad, has actually told the local press that isn't true. He argued that the correct procedures had not been adhered to in order that the square couldn't have actually been debuted when it was supposed to in Egypt. And he described the rumors of its banning as, quote, propaganda for the film. You know, what do you make of those charges?
Well, to be honest, I don't think it's a very smart idea to get into a war of words with the person who is responsible for millions of Egyptians being able to see this film. So we have moved forward. We are resubmitting the film with Marian Khouri and Misr International Films, which is a very respected distribution company in Egypt. And we are hopeful and crossing our fingers that the film will pass. We've had many people say that they are now welcoming of the film. So we are looking forward to that happening, and we'll see. The Egyptian public has not waited for that to happen. The film has been a couple hours after it went up on Netflix, ripped off online, and uploaded over and over and over again. Initially, we made the very naive decision to try to pull it down because we wanted people to see the full final version in its full quality, and have Egyptians have the same experience of the film as the rest of the world had. But this was much bigger than us. Egyptians felt like the rest of the world has seen this film. It's an Oscar-nominated film. They should see it at the same time everybody else has. And so the film has been copied, uploaded, and I don't know, you know the numbers. I mean, well, it's staggering how many people have seen it. I think in a couple of days, about 750,000 people have seen it.
This film is not Jehane's or mine. This film was born in Tahrir Square. It was made by people who came together in that square, who felt that we could fight back with a document such as this, and I think that its spirit and its energy has transcended to audiences both internationally and in Egypt. And I think that the message of this film, which is about the kind of the beauty of the power of people and the triumph and difficulties of popular movements, has surfaced and is igniting a lot of attention and connectivity in different squares around the world. We just showed the film in Kiev 4 days ago. It was minus 15-degree weather, and over 300 people came to the screening in the middle of the public square there, and they started chanting at the end of it. We did a Q&A, and they were saying, you know, Mayadan will not be free until El Midan is free. And El Midan is what we call our square in Egypt, and Mayadan is what they call their square in Kiev. So I think that there's a moment around the world that we see right now with squares around the world and people power movements trying to rewrite the social contract.
And in terms of connectivity, you're quite right. I mean, I've got a Facebook page here. This is just one of many Facebook pages of people trying to organise, free screenings so that people can all come together to watch it in various locations. You mentioned Kiev, and this was in Egypt. But let's get back to the film. I want us to take an exclusive look at an exclusive clip that was actually not included in the final cut of the film. Jehane, can you please set this up for us?
This is at a moment in time when the election was the final sort of vote was about to happen, and the runoff was between Shafiq, who was Mubarak's ex-prime minister and for presidency, and Mohamed Morsi. And Ahmed goes to a coffee shop and gets into a discussion with a bunch of people that he meets in the coffee shop about this choice.
أعلنت لجنة الانتخابات الرئاسية أمس أن جولة الإعادة في الانتخابات الرئاسية ستجرى بين المرشحين محمد مرسي وأحمد شفيق بعد حصولهما على أعلى الأصوات في الجولة الأولى. وقال رئيس اللجنة
دلوقتي انا اتحطيت ما بين مرسي وشفيق وانا مش عارف اعمل ايه بالظبط وهم اللي حطوني في ده.
سواء الاخوان زي ما احنا قلنا برضه مجتمع منغلق على نفسه هيجيبوا الاخوان ويعمل لي حزب وطني جديد فاهمني ويعمل حكومه من نفسه والشعب برضه هيتهمش.
انتخبت احمد شفيق يبقى انت انتخبت مبارك، جبت مبارك. انتخبت الاخوان يبقى انت انتخبت حماس. الاخوان هتاخدها عافيه زور. انا وانت هنقعد نهبهب مع بعض والاخوان هتاخدها عافيه زور. ننزل الميدان يا جدعان، احنا القوه. انت رافض مرسي، معلش انت رافض مرسي وشفيق، وانت رافض مرسي وشفيق، وانا رافض مرسي وشفيق. لو الشعب ده كله نزل انا رافض الاثنين، ساعتها مش هيقدر يعمل لنا حاجه. لا. نقول حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
نعم الوكيل في البلد واللي مش عاوز
سخن الجماعه الفلاحين اهو. عارفين احنا كده عاملين زي ايه؟ زي اللي صوتهم ما بيوصلش بالظبط. ايوه بالظبط. ادي الثوره، هو ده حال الثوره فعلا. صح؟ صوتنا ما بيوصلش. لا ما تتكلم صوتك ما بيوصلش.
So Jehane, tell us why didn't this make it into the final film? It seems like such an important kind of moment. Why did you cut it?
Oh, it killed me. It's like every scene that you cut out of these films are like, we're ripping a little piece of your heart out. So this is why it's so exciting, actually, releasing these films on a place like Netflix and online, because we're going to be able to upload scenes like this, and people will be able to, to see all of the different scenes that were super important scenes that were cut out. In the end, the film is a long film. It's 104 minutes. Normally, my films are 90 minutes. That's also, it's a lot, 2.5 years is a lot to fit into 90 minutes. But, as you saw, we basically, if you watch the film, you do get the point across that people are frustrated with this decision, that part of the ideas of the revolution was to be able to create alternatives and parties to other people to vote for. And I think that's what you see here, where people are frustrated with this choice between these two parties that have held power for such a long time. And actually, there was a piece that was unsubtitled. What was that piece saying in the piece that we just saw?
I don't remember actually.
Oh, sorry.
But I think that the thing that the film. This film is about 3 characters and their journey through the 2.5 years that we cover, and their use of Tahrir Square as their political tool for fighting back. It's not by any means an account of the entire Egyptian revolution, because as all of us who participated in this revolution know, nobody can make a film or write a book or write an article or a news piece or anything to describe an account that will do justice to everything that's happened in Egypt. And the situation in Egypt, as we saw today, is still extremely fluid, and the dust is far from settling. So, this film is really just at the beginning of a conversation, and that's our hope about this film, and that's what we encourage people to use it as a way to to continue the conversation about Egypt and to keep it in the world consciousness, to keep it in the attention and to take it to as many stages as we can take it to, so that, as Ahmed says, our voice will be heard.
I think it's a kind of, you've sort of hit the nail on the head there, I think, with this idea of it being a conversation, this idea of it being dialogue. You sort of feel that in the film, as opposed to be sort of one long linear narrative, it almost feels like kind of just vignettes of conversations that are around this one place, this is one moment in time. But not everybody has kind of perceived it that way. While the film has received extraordinary amounts of praise, it got 4 stars from the Washington Post. It's also actually been critiqued for what some see as a one-sided and sometimes narrow portrayal of the Egyptian revolution. Max Fisher of the Washington Post actually wrote an entry detailing his issues with the film. I just want to read you one part of what he says. He said, quote, "The film's tendency to be remarkably generous towards its activist subjects while repeatedly and uncritically recycling the darkest stereotypes and conspiracy theories about supporters of one of Egypt's largest political movements, the Muslim Brotherhood." Do you agree that you were uncritical? Would you be more critical now and perhaps more lenient towards the Muslim Brotherhood in your telling, given what's happened since?
It's not about us filmmakers being critical or uncritical. It's about following a human story and trying to be as truthful and represent your characters' journeys as authentically and as truthfully as possible. So whatever Ahmed's feelings were towards the Muslim Brotherhood at the time, we expressed those feelings. So the judgment that I leave to when I make a judgment towards my film, when I'm watching it, is that I show it to the characters and I ask the characters, have I been able to translate or given people a glimpse of what it felt like to go through this experience? And if they've said yes, then I feel like I've done my job. And if they say no, then I go back and I start re-editing the film because it didn't feel true to their experience. Now, there's many different, this revolution covered, involved 80 million people. There's absolutely no way that I was trying or that we were trying to tell a story of 80 million people. We were trying to tell a story of 3 guys in a square, one of them being Mehdi, who's actually a Muslim Brotherhood member of 25 years and somebody that is loved and that people ask about when the film's finished and that people continue to write us and ask about.
And I think also, what's been amazing is as Jehane says, is really, at the end of the day, the only people who can hold us accountable with this film in terms of portrayal are the characters that are in it. And this film is about 3 central characters, Ahmed, Mehdi, and Khalid, and their relationship. And Mehdi is the member of is the character who happens to be a 25-year member in the Muslim Brotherhood. And he and his family were extremely proud of the film and felt that the film honored and represented what they went through and what their experience was. So I really, I think that a lot of, when foreign journalists speak on behalf of a political group in Egypt as though they represent their, as though they're like the spokespersons, it's very strange. And I think that, they should actually let the people of Egypt decide on that point how they feel about the representation. And I think, and I think that we're very honored to see that the wide range of support for the film in Egypt has come from so many different people of such different backgrounds. We've had people come up to us who have families that are half Muslim Brotherhood, half members of the security state, and come up and said, thank you so much because you've reminded us what this fight was about. You've stripped it of just being Brotherhood or secular or army supporter or non-army supporter, and you reminded us that this was about the Egyptian people. And all these other names and labels came second. So I think that's ironic. The goal of the film is to remind people that this is a story of the people, for the people, by the people. And what made Tahrir work is when there was that collective ideology and that support, where people were able, as Mehdi says in the film, when we come to Tahrir, we're no longer Brotherhood, we're no longer Salafi, we're no longer anything, we're Egyptians. And that was the state of Tahrir.
I think that's a good point. I suppose just sort of to say that Max Fisher, obviously he was there, he's not Egyptian, but he was in Cairo and he was covering it. But I do take your point, this idea of it being, certainly a narrative about the numerous different types of Egyptian who were there, during the time that you were filming. We've got a comment actually.
And I think.
No, go for it, Karim.
I just want to say something on that point, because it's a very interesting point, actually, because, I think this is a larger conversation about political commentary analysis versus cultural commentary and analysis. And if you look at that same period, the same newspaper, the Washington Post, we had 3 people write about the film. Anne Hornaday, Steve Dollar, and Max Fisher. Steve Dollar and Anne Hornaday are people who write about culture and art and film. Max Fisher is a political blogger. I think that when you look at a film as a political analysis, you are treating it as a research paper, which is maybe what a lot of the DC pundits are more used to. But when you look at it as a piece of art, you understand the role of art in society. There's a difference between art and journalism, and we by no way claim to be a full-on journalistic account of what happened in Egypt, because nobody could represent such a thing.
I think that, you know, the sort of point you make about the art, I think is definitely well taken. You know, and on that note, we have a comment here. This is from the live blog, The Square Live. Considering crackdowns on Egyptian press who are trying to cover this dark moment in politics, do you think that you could make The Square sequel if you tried to now?
I think that, you know, this, as we said, this is a conversation starter. Nobody owns the Egyptian narrative, and this film certainly doesn't. I think that what we would love to see is for this film to be able to use the momentum behind the film to bring attention to a lot of other people who are making great work in Egypt, representing different stories and different narratives. And I think that we should bring attention to all these stories. You know, there's amazing films being made about the role of the police and the story of the police as they imploded as an organization and have tried to come back together. There's amazing films being made about the role of women during the revolution. I think that we should collect all these stories and continue to put them together. And I think that there's a long, a long list of incredible filmmakers in Egypt who are going to continue documenting. We definitely have also over 1,600 hours of footage. So this is by no means the only piece of content that we can create out of our experience, and we encourage anyone who's interested in working on getting more stories out there to contact us and see how we can work together. Because again, this is a collaborative process, and Jehane and I are just the representatives of this project.
And you know, I have to say,
here in the States.
Yeah.
Actually, there's other representatives in Cairo. So
yeah,
this
just representatives on the show, I mean.
Oh, on the show, yeah. This is a collaboration of over 40 Egyptians. So I can't stress enough how much this was a team effort that made this.
And the idea,
and as Karim said, incredible filmmakers that are making films about all different, you know, women and police, and that are ongoing now, that we intend to support when they come out, because it is important to stand for artistic integrity and freedom of the press in Egypt at this point.
Well, I think that is certainly, you know, kind of bringing us back, sort of full circle, back to the square again today. You know, it is the Saturday, January 25th in Cairo, and it's 3 years on. I have some tweets here from people saying the conversation between Khalid Rami and Ahmed hinted at a lack of organisation. Have there been any changes in strategy here? I mean, sadly, you know, even though we are 3 years on, really what they were talking about in Tahrir when you were filming kind of is still relevant today. So, you know, have there been any changes in strategy for the people, for the revolutionaries?
I wish Khalid was here to talk to that, because he's really the best person who's on the ground to talk to that question. I will tell you what he said to me when we've talked about it. He said this is a long process. You know, we're 3 years into it. There is organizing that is happening. Obviously, you know, we're in a difficult time in Egypt, and you're not seeing, you know, the kind of ideal, leadership and organization that's coming up from the revolutionary side, perhaps. That's what, you know, but it takes time. And if you think about, I keep reminding people about the civil rights movement, how long that took, and the roller coaster ride that was. In the United States, it took us 16 years to get from revolution to constitution. So I believe these things take time. But again, I encourage, this is a conversation starter, and it's a very important question. And when we're able to bring in Khalid and others who are working on the ground for political change, I think they're best suited to answer that question, and we are continuing the conversation.
People have definitely learned from the mistakes of the movement, and I think that the film also shows that the revolutionaries or the activists that we focus on do find moments where they criticize themselves and and find that with the different failures of agreement and cooperation that they went through. And I think the country as a whole has had to go through certain procedures and certain moments to understand what the future of the country can entail. I mean, I think that what you saw this summer when you had millions of Egyptians come down and say no to Mohammed Morsi, of course, what that was a representation of Egyptians regaining their confidence that regardless of what the political process was saying, that they could challenge that process as well and make a stand and say, this is not representative of what we want. Now, what happened after that is a whole different conversation, and that's not the purpose of my point on that. But the point is that people coming down and reclaiming their rights, their sense of we can continue to put pressure on the government when we want to. We have a voice, we have a need to be represented, is something that I think has been born in Egypt in that square, and regardless of how dark of a moment we're in, it's not going to go away. It will, as Khaled has said in the film, and as many revolutionaries have said, this movement comes in waves, and from what we can see happening in Egypt, it's very evident that another wave is coming.
And you mentioned another wave. We kind of are on the eve, it feels like anyway, of another wave. And you mentioned Mohammed Morsi. What about Sisi? I mean, all the headlines at the moment seem to be geared towards Sisi and whether or not he will be positioned as a future leader in Egypt. Another kind of pharaoh, which I know in the film, Ahmed was very clear that leaders were not something that he desired. He didn't want another leader. What do you make of Sisi in that context then?
I mean,
can I just also say, in terms of that comment of Ahmed's, Ahmed says, we don't need leaders, we need a consciousness. And out of that consciousness will come a good leader. So he does see a future for leadership in Egypt.
And I think what he means by the conscience, that Egypt needs is, he's talking about that pluralistic society, about that finding that common ground, that place where all Egyptians can agree upon and say, this represents all of us. This is the basic agreement, the social contract of who we want and how we're going to hold power accountable. And I think that it's not about being against the brotherhood or the army or any of these things. I mean, that kind of comment is not understanding the film or the movement in Egypt. The army is a fundamental part of Egypt. The brotherhood is an important political part of Egypt as well. The idea is that common ground, that Egyptian state, that Egyptian society, that Egyptian dream of what Egypt can become is above everything else. And all other aspects of society fit into that, and the people come first. And I think that is what Egyptians are striving for. That is what Egyptians are trying to push for. And that is what made in Egypt, the land of the pharaohs, as you say, the pyramid get flipped upside down. I mean, in Tahrir Square, what happened in those first 18 days was the pyramid was flipped upside down, and people felt a sense of authorship for their future. And I think that what's moving this movement is that there is a dedicated few, and Ahmed and many of the people in the film and many of the people that we know in Egypt are representative of that dedicated few who are unwilling to relinquish their right to that authorship of the future. So they will continue to put pressure, and eventually that will triumph.
Okay, well, Karim and Jehane, thank you so much for joining me. I want to squeeze in one more tweet really quickly before I'm actually killed by my producers, but I think it's an important one. Your film has been Oscar nominated. There's a lot of praise for it. But in terms of social activism, in terms of people watching it, I have a tweet here from Sanaz Al-Esafar, I hope I pronounced that right, saying, from a social action perspective, what should the audience do after seeing the film?
It's a conversation starter, so give your thoughts, tweet about it, write about it, if you liked it, tell your friends to see it. And ultimately, the thing about films like this is it reminds us that we're all human beings. And I think that what's happening in Egypt is really, the step that we really need to take is a step further towards pluralism. And that's what I think a film which is supposed to be a healing film, a film bringing people together again, reminding people of the unity that we felt at the beginning of this revolution, reminding each of us of the humanity inside each of us, regardless of political background. I hope that that is what people see when they watch this film, and that in itself is something. And sharing it with your friends and saying that this is an important topic to be talking about. That's action.
Well,
I think it's also to remember the power and responsibility of witness. You know, I think what happened in Tahrir during those 18 days was there was a fight between the Egyptian protesters versus the Egyptian dictator. And when the world attention shifted to Egypt and everyone was glued to the television screens, that leveled the playing field, because all of a sudden the Egyptian protesters had the audience of the world standing with them and supporting them, and that made them unstoppable and protected them and allowed for the unbelievable to happen with the toppling of Mubarak. So we can change the world this way if we keep banding, if we come together and realize that these fights and these moments where people are standing up for change affect all of us. They affect that thread of humanity that Jehane was talking about.
Well, Karim, I think you said that really beautifully, and I want to thank you so much, you and Jehane, for joining us to talk about the square with me today. And guys, everybody that was taking part as well in the live portion of this, thank you so much for all your comments, all your tweets. We really appreciate it. But Jehane and Karim, thank you so much for joining me today on HuffPost Live.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And guys, you can check out all of the conversations and the information we've been talking about. And of course, The Square, it is out on Netflix now. Stick around, there is much more HuffPost Live coming up next.